So hello, say hi, and I'm going to introduce Laura DeFranco. DeFranco? Which is it?
Oh, I'll take either one. You're giving it a good accent. That's good. It's Italian accent.
Mangia, I learned recently, means eat. That's about what I know in Italian.
That's an important.
All right. Laura is the owner of Brave Healer Productions. She's a published poet and author, inspirational speaker, holistic physical therapist, and third-degree black belt in Taekwondo. With over 2 decades of experience in healing, praised as our favorite class by the Writers Center, her brave, intuitive writing and healing workshops are the reason she was born. She helps healers get their badass, authentic voice published in order to heal the world with their words. Her new book, Brave Healing, A Guide for Your Journey, just came out June 1st. And I will also include a link to her website where you can get a call, a little chat as well. Let me get back where I can see her better. All right, so welcome, Laura. And we have collaborated a couple times.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I am so thrilled to have this conversation. We have collaborated a couple times, and every time it has been, that synchronicity has just been amazing, like the timing of things to come together. And I feel that way again. Here she's releasing a book, and I'm releasing a book in June 21st. And we have such similar goals, I would say, not approaches necessarily, but we're coming from very different stories and places, and yet finding our way kind of in a similar, to a similar place, to joy and healing, so that we can get there, right? So I drew a card this morning, which I hadn't intended to be for this, but I wanted to share because I thought it was so appropriate. And it says expression.
Oh my gosh.
And it says messenger, revelation, trust your voice. And
how perfect is that?
Yeah, right? So, and this was unprompted. I just like to draw a card in the morning sometimes, for the day. And that's what I drew this morning. And it was meant for me in the moment because I was going through a moment of, okay, I'm trusting the flow, and all that. And it was like confirmation. But then I thought that's also so perfect for the conversation we're going to have, because I think that's a lot of what your book is about. Yes? About your expression and trusting your inner self, your voice, right? So I thought that was just,
no doubt,
just amazing synchronicity again. Like when you send me a poem and you ask if I have a painting to pair with it, it almost always seems like, oh, I just made this painting that goes with. It's amazing how that works, right? So I don't have your book to hold up yet. I have 2 on the way. They should be in my mailbox any day. I have mine, and so I'm going to hold that up real quick, The Girl Who Dances with Delight. And it is also kind of about getting in tune with that inner, trusting your inner. I'm calling it delight. You're calling it warrior, but it's the same kind of thing, right? It's that inner fire, maybe would be a good term for both. And I'm going to give away a copy of Laura's book to one of the viewers after when I post this online, and she's going to give away a copy of mine. So stick around and enjoy the chat, and I hope there'll be something worthwhile for everyone. So I asked Laura how she felt about the topic of worthy of joy, and because I think that part of the healing in her book is about that. And I noticed in my own that's about that. I wrote that on the back cover, like we are all worthy of joy. It has taken me a lot of healing to get there. And she just shared a poem that I printed out online, and it was called Worth the Next Sunrise. And I feel like that's similar, right? Because you're deciding that you're worthy of this life and of the next sunrise. So I'm curious what that worthy of joy, how that relates to your book and the Brave Healing process, what you would have to say about that.
Yeah, thanks. That's such an important topic, I think, for a lot of us. And I think you're, you and I are both doing that similar work in the world, and so are many others.
Mhm.
And it seems like a hot topic, and it's an important topic. It's like so overdue that we step
Mm.
into our worthiness, right?
I just felt the shivers when you said that.
Yeah, I mean, my story too took me a long, in my opinion, way too long to get to the place where I knew I was worthy of this kind of thing, worthy of whatever life I really desire,
Mm-hmm.
And so, timing is always divine. It took me this long because it was supposed to take me this long. And I needed to get through certain things to be able to even write this book
Mm-hmm.
and to share this with you today. And
Yeah.
so it's all good. But, I love to express the message, you were born, so you're worthy.
Uh-huh.
I mean, so you don't need to do
Hallelujah.
anything else. Yeah, seriously. Like, everybody's message and story matters, and we need to start encouraging each other to express them.
Yes, yes. And that's a lot of what your book is about, right? Through your own story and sharing your memoir, you also are encouraging others to do that same thing, right? And dig in and get to their own return to their worthiness almost. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I spent a lifetime and a career in holistic physical therapy trying to figure out how to heal this, how to heal. And I knew from a very early moment that it was not just about making my physical pain go away.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that I had to integrate mind, body, soul on this journey. And so I started a long time ago trying to do that. So now, gosh, I'm so excited to tell you that I've put together some of those amazing, powerful tools that I learned about integrating mind, body, soul in the process of healing. And I put them in there with personal stories of my own journey so that the reader could trust me.
Right.
And it wasn't just like I was going to tell you what to do. I got to tell you what I've been through so that you understand that what I've been doing has been working.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I get it. I feel like
So,
I did a lot of I feel like I took a similar approach, even though I don't know if for you planned it that way or if it just kind of flowed that way. For me, it just kind of flowed that way. I'm curious, did you plan it that way, or was it more like just kind of going along with what felt like it was working and flowing?
Totally. It's always about the flow, isn't it? Right? Because, you and I have gotten to the place where we've learned how to hear the language of our soul and intuition. So when you get good at that, things do flow, and then you begin to trust the flow, and you don't need to try to do anything anymore. Well, what an awesome feeling.
It is. And yet I want to let anyone viewing know who may not always feel like it comes so easy. You are very willing and brave, hence brave healer, to share from a very raw place, which I appreciate and respect. And in your poem that you just wrote last week, even though you've written this book and you've gone with the flow, she talks about just sitting there, and she knows she's been there with this feeling before, but here it was again, right? Surfacing again. And so even though you've written the book and you've gone through this journey, and I feel the same way with this, you get to that point where, okay, I know, that I can get through this, and thankfully, because I've been through it enough times that I've learned to get through it maybe in a healthier way, to dance it out or box it out or whatever works at the time. It's been a long time since I took karate, but I did for 3 years, so I appreciate it. I only made it to brown belt, but before we moved, and it's an Okinawan style, and there's not very many around the country, so I haven't been able to get back into it. But I love that you bring the holistic, you got the physical movement and working through it, and then you've got the spiritual as well, and the poetic and the lyrical and the listening, right? Because listening's part of the writing. And I think you talk about that some in your book too, maybe not in those exact words, but I only have read the first couple chapters. I'm waiting for the one in the mailbox to finish it, and that was enough. And that tells me how worthwhile it is, how valuable it is, because when you can get that much just from the first couple chapters, how much more can you get, when you go through every step in the whole process? And I just kept feeling myself like, yes. I kept feeling myself feel that while I was reading it and thinking, this is needed, this message and our willingness to step up and do it, right? The people who are stepping up to read it, that's a thing to applaud as well. I think everyone who takes that step, who's willing to take that step. So how you've been, promoting the book and you're sharing about it. If I didn't know anything about it yet, what would be your first, invitation to me to take that step? Does that make sense, that question?
Yeah, and I want to first address something you said about the poem that I wrote last week, because I think it's really important.
Okay,
for people to understand that the process is lifelong.
Mm-hmm.
And you're learning tools, you're learning things that change everything sometimes. And then you still have patterns and things that come up that you have a little bit better awareness around. And really, I know this, awareness is the foundation for everything that we're doing on this healing journey. So when we go at the stuff of our life with that kind of awareness and curiosity, I love that word too.
Yeah.
Then everything becomes a little lighter and a little freer, and you don't get so sucked into that pit so quickly anymore. And so, yes, the things, they surface for me, they continue to surface for me. And I look at everything as an opportunity for more awareness. And sometimes that sounds kind of boring, but really it's been quite miraculous.
And liberating, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
That's a word that I feel like is it's time for. And it applies to what we're both working on. I think part of the being worthy for joy is feeling free to lean into it, right? To not feel obligated to suffer almost, if that makes sense.
Yep.
I mean, and there's so much going on in the world.
We've been practicing the suffering.
Yeah. And there's so much in the world that we feel as sensitives. If you're, the more thin your skin is, because you don't want to put on a jacket and block yourself off from the world, the more you feel it. But if you feel like you have to be part of the suffering, that's the difference, right? You can feel it, but you get to the point where you can heal enough for yourself that you can then help others. Yeah. That's what you're going through, right? With your process. And isn't that part of what your book is about, healing yourself to then be able to heal the world in a lot of ways? Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, we don't heal anyone. We guide them to a place where they heal themselves.
Right.
So it's about having a choice. So if you have the awareness, then you can choose joy, no matter, even if you're in the middle of the worst suffering you've ever felt or seen or experienced. Honestly, it's a choice. So that's a strong statement to make.
Yeah.
But I've learned that I can be in the middle of anything and still choose joy. And once you have moved through the piece of worthiness, it gets a lot easier, because then you realize it's your choice every moment of the day, any moment of the day you feel like, right?
Right. I talk about opening it. And I think that's kind of the same thing. Like, it's there. And and other people talk about different voices, whether you're leaning into the voice, of fear, or you're leaning into the voice of your heart, or love, or joy, or following your bliss, or whatever you want to call it. It's that same, it all relates to that same choice that you're talking about, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And huge.
Yeah. Yes, it is. And so now I'll skip forward to what I would tell people about the book. Here's the question I love to ask. So what if there was something you haven't learned yet that could change everything? And I think that these kinds of books that we're writing are those books, because we are doing this differently. We are doing life differently.
Yeah.
We are not following everyone's rules. We're making our own. We're living with heart and compassion and awareness and courage. And we're finally learning how to speak up. And we are a generation of women whose mothers weren't able to. And so we're passing this new thing down to our kids. And this is like a big deal. And I always encourage people that, if you're on this particular journey and you were called to play a little bit bigger like this, be proud of yourself. We have a humongous mission in the world right now to do this. And that's part of what's driving me, I know, and driving me to be brave and to share the stories. because as soon as we share the stories, there's healing for us and for anybody hearing it.
And
it's so important.
I love that you said the choice, because it's like you extend the invitation and offer the choice. Even though we all have it, we don't always realize or remember that we have it, right? So it's that
exactly
reclaiming or remembering that we have that choice. And I love that that's part of the healing process that you're walking through. Really, it's about life choices.
Yeah,
both
every
of
day.
our books are that's a big part of it, and having the courage to take responsibility for our own choices, right? And not let others do that.
Yeah, and what's so cool is there's so many different awesome tools for this.
Mm-hmm.
And you've offered some and I've offered some, and the idea is to encourage people to not give up hope.
Yeah.
To keep looking for the way that works for them. And I just think it's amazing that we have the tools that we have today. And some of them might feel way out of the box or way sort of not traditional or whatever. You know, you could call them whatever you want to call them, alternative, holistic, woo-woo, you know, whatever word you want to use. But I think it's important to use what works.
Yeah. Yes.
You know?
Yes.
Yeah.
And to try different things and find what works for you, right? So that's why I feel like your book is so, both of them, there's a lot in there. There's a lot of things that you can take this and make it your own and see, you know, try this on or try that on and see what works. And then the whole time you have someone who's being very raw and honest, because that intimacy enables you to connect and feel like, okay, I'm not alone in this. You know, our story's not the same, but of course we have similar feelings and things that we've gone through on our different paths and on our different journeys. We've both felt the grief or the depression or the fear or, you know, not emptiness or whatever it might be. We go through the same feelings on a different journey, right? With different experiences. But being able to share that, people who are willing to be open and honest enough for you to actually get that glimpse, that's big, I think, compared to sometimes in the past, maybe where we haven't been able to do that. Like you were saying earlier, you know, that you have that option.
Yes, that's like yes with 3 exclamation points. You know, I was looking at a post this morning on Facebook, and I'm on a page that we help each other with the posters and sharing and building our platforms and all that good stuff. And this poster was basically, this very simple message was share your story, you know. And the very first comment on that thread from somebody said, but not on Facebook. And I had to laugh because I share everything on Facebook. Like I'm a fairly transparent person. I have now written my story for everybody to read. So like, whatever, you know, if you're going to judge me, go for it.
Right.
But when you get to a place where you don't care anymore, it's a little nicer because you're not constantly taking physical hits to your body about, oh my God, what they won't like me, or they're not going to, what are they going to think about me, or this or that. But I had to laugh because there's still people so afraid that they don't want to be their real selves in places like that because, you know, there's lots of good reasons, I'm sure, but I can't think of any right now.
Well, as you said that, I thought about my own, you know, issues with that, and it has taken me a lot to be seen. But I have always kind of worn my heart on my sleeve at the same time. So I'm like a mix of, you know, heart on the sleeve when I feel safe with the people, but felt like I was supposed to protect and guard myself, you know, from other things. And I did a painting that this reminds me of. I was really surprising. And this is, I think the writing in your book is similar to the same things that I go through with art, where you start getting these messages as you're in the process, right? When you're writing to feng shui your soul. Did I say it correctly?
Yeah, you did. Yes.
I think it's very similar to painting for the same thing. And so this woman showed up with a scarf on, you know, hiding herself. And her message was, I'm not hiding because I'm afraid or because someone else told me I had to hide myself. It was, I'm choosing who to share my self with because I recognize my own value And hence I choose where and when to share to bear my full being, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And so I think that has to do with the confidence and the willingness to be seen, right? It's back to your choices. It comes back to that word you just said with choices and choosing your own.
You can make a choice from that intuition.
Yeah. Instead of letting others decide. You not post on Facebook because you're afraid of what others are going to think. You choose for yourself. And it has to do with confidence is a big, huge part of it, right? And the worthiness for joy and for healing, that's all part of that. Getting to our core kind of confidence is part of that, and going through that healing process. I think your book is about building that muscle some.
For sure. I love that too. Building the muscle. That is definitely, I mean, you and I have gone through some hardcore boot camp training on this muscle, right? I mean, it takes, you guys have heard me say it takes a warrior, because it's not for sissies. You really have to be ready for some pretty harsh feelings and being able to move through them and really navigate this whole thing with authenticity and vulnerability. None of it feels great all the time, but when you continue to aim yourself toward the joy, boy, that feels great.
Yes,
it's worth
right.
it.
Leaning into that, going that direction, like following that. I get the idea of the follow your bliss now. And when I first came across that quote in that book, it was like foreign to me, because that's not what I learned. I learned you gotta no pain, no gain and all that stuff. So follow your bliss, like that was like fairy stuff. But I get it now. Like I'm willing and bold and brave enough to do it. But why did it seem like it even needed to be brave? Seems like something's going on here, to the fact that requires bravery. But something else you said made me think of, and I know when I went through the process with this, and I assume you went through the same thing, but tell me if I'm wrong. I think we both had to have, having read how honest and bold your book is we didn't write it for the critics. Right?
Exactly.
And you don't write it for the critics. You don't share it on Facebook for the critics. You don't live it for the critics. And like, that's big. We don't live our lives for the critics.
Yeah. That's what I was going to add to your thing, about worthiness and courage. It also, when you're driven by that purpose, oh my gosh, that's so right. You don't do anything for the critics. You do it for the person who possibly might need to hear your story the way only you can tell it. Mm-hmm. And I always tell people, what if the very pain you're afraid to share is exactly the thing that someone else needs to hear to feel hope for the very first time ever?
Right.
Like, would that make you brave enough to share an authentic story on a blog, on Facebook, on whatever, for me, the answer is yes.
Yes. Yeah. And ditto. And it's big, because you're sharing, I know in your book, you share some deep personal things that you had to overcome in terms of whether it had to do with substances or it had to do with people that, were putting you down or whatever, I remember a moment that you share about in a car with your dad. And I remember a moment that you share at a party or something with, someone before your soccer game. And I'm not going to get into the details, but just those are those moments. Sharing those that might reach out and touch that person who's, in that place, right? And needs to make that same decision. And I have similar things in mind about, past abuse and writing my own Declaration of Independence, deciding that being the victim then, when I was, very young, doesn't define me now. And that's big, to make that choice.
Yep. It's all about how you're redefining yourself. And actually, it's more even about how you're living in the moment and not defining yourself at all.
I love that.
Because I know for me, as soon as I get caught up in another label, even the current one of author of a new book.
Exactly.
I mean, so that's just going to keep bumping you up against have you read the book, The Big Leap, about the upper limit problem? So we're always up against the next level of this, and it's kind of funny and repetitive, but just going to be the next layer.
It's crazy, right? I haven't read the whole book. I read part of it, and that's as far as I got. But then that was months ago. Maybe it was last year. And then just last week, around the same time you were writing that sunrise poem, around the same time, I was on the back porch dancing and talking out loud to the mystery, to whatever, to myself, maybe, to all of it, and saying, what is this feeling? I was having a very similar moment. What is this feeling? And is it fear? Is it fear of success? Is it fear of failure? What was I feeling, And I talked it out. And an hour later, I realized I needed to shatter some limits that I had not even realized I was holding, that's what that feeling was. It was hitting that limit, if that makes sense,
Yeah.
And it takes courage
Definitely.
to take a step past that limit, even wherever we got it from, whether we created it or we inherited it or whatever it was. And I felt like that we were having your poem felt similar, because you talked about, what if something that I shared in my book is wrong? Something to that effect. I may not quote it just right, but I had a similar feeling. And I was, when you're putting this out there and you're putting yourself that boldly out there, not because you care necessarily how someone's going to judge it, but because you care from your heart about the healing, that you want it to be, you don't want to be steering anyone wrong. To me, that's where I get it, that it's coming from, not from what anybody else decides, right? It's that we're genuinely rooted in wanting to be honest and wanting to share something that's going to be helpful, not harmful, right, to anybody.
Yes, of course. And plus, you're talking to somebody who got licensed as a healing professional. You want to add that baggage onto things. And just, of course, we don't want to hurt anybody. The thing that's funny, you're making me think about books in general too. Something that gets people so stuffed up and they never end up writing their story or writing their book is that they're so afraid that by the time they're finished, they're either going to change their mind or it's all going to be wrong or whatever it is. But, books are a snapshot of time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have just pulled that one away from myself and just gone, you know what? You can finish this book, and guess what? You can start the next one if you're ready. Yeah.
Yeah. And the last chapter in mine talks about enough and expanding. And that's kind of what it was talking about, is like, okay, this is enough. Enough is enough for this here. And it wasn't just about that. It talks about us being enough and expansive as well. But it applies to lots of things. It can be us. It can be a creative project. And so you can be enough and expansive, right? It's not one or the other. And that's a big thing. And so when you talk about writing a book, I was thinking, okay, that work in progress. I was going through the same, feelings at the same time. Okay, this book is static. So like we are not, right. We're works in progress, right? And we keep going. And so when you leave the book there, my husband and I were just talking about it last night, because I was thinking about this call with you, how philosophers from how many years ago, or even like Thoreau or Emerson, like those books are there. And, that's that. Who knows if they still thought that, at the time,
exactly.
Or what they would think now. And so you have to let that be, right? The book has its life and it's static and it moves, and you can revise it. You can write a new edition. I just read a book recently that it was 10 years later, so the author was writing, this is my reflection 10 years later. And what they agree with and what they don't. Yeah. So I put in here, if you don't agree with me, I gave a couple steps, and the last one was, and you know what, it's totally ignore it. If after you go through this, you've really asked yourself why. If you still don't, it's not in line with your core values, ignore it. I might disagree with myself by the time you read this. Right? And I think that's where you have to be able to release it. And I think that applies. I wrote in my notes, to our life in general, not just writing a book. Because we noticed it in the book, but then how many stories are we telling in our lives? And I mean, this is what you do, right? Writing is part of the healing that you facilitate. Don't you offer writers workshops and everything. And so I so related to our stories. And how many times are we holding a static story of ourselves that is not static? That it can change. We can change it. And I know you went through that in some of the personal stuff that you shared in your book with personal stories of, that moment at the Thanksgiving table and having to realize to change it.
Yeah. Definitely. And it's always in the moment and always with your, I'm always relating people or aiming people back at their body awareness. And that's in the book. The guided exercises are getting you in touch with the feeling. It takes some courage to feel, plain and simple. So, but when you connect with that place and the sensations, emotions, feelings of whatever is going on, then we do the writing from that place. We don't do the writing from this place, which is always going to just try to analyze things and overthink things and all of that. And so that tool, getting back to that place where I was just feeling the feeling and not adding any meaning to it, was what helped me move through some of those places I was getting stuck. Those stories I told you about being in those places and just full of whatever it was, sadness or anger or unworthiness or, you know, and not really realizing the bigger possibility for myself.
Yeah.
And it's easy, of course, to look back and write about these things before, you know, like when you've already lived through them. It's so easy to, well, at least I think it's easy, but now is just the practice. So I like talking about the practice with people. I really enjoy the conversations with people that get to these things that really matter.
Yeah.
And joy matters. Like it really, really matters. It is time that we go for the joy.
Yeah. Follow the pleasure, follow the joy. I mean, like, and how many messages, I don't know, for you growing up, how many people were encouraging that, but I wasn't getting that message very much. It wasn't a prevalent cultural message that I was getting. I mean, there was some of it, a little, you know, there were pushes and little bits of it, but it was definitely not what the carrot was in a lot of circumstances, if that makes sense. You know, the grade or the whatever the next thing was.
Yes.
It didn't have to do with, nobody was asking me that most of the time. So it
was a little bit
to get there.
Yeah, it was a little bit success and achievement oriented. And inside of that were messages like, you know, do the best you can and you can be anything you want to be. But you know what I mean? So it's interesting. Yes, there's little sparks of it in there, but it was mostly like, okay, you need to go to school and get a good degree, and then you need to get your job, and then you should be doing this. And that's all going to be how you get to joy and happiness.
Right.
And, you know, you don't realize until you've actually checked off all of the marks that may not be true for you. Nobody taught me to follow my intuition until much later in life.
And like,
and boy, what a miracle that is. Yeah.
That you were just saying. And
exactly.
That's huge. When you were saying that, it reminded me of something that just happened a little while ago, but it's an example of that same kind of thing. A flyer had come in the mail for like, win, you know, whatever at the car dealership, come and get your prize or something like that. And I needed the money to pay for a printing bill. I'm like, okay, maybe the universe really wants me to have it this time. I'm going to go. And then before I walked out the door, my stomach felt horrible. And I'm like, what is that? Why do I feel sick to my stomach? It was my body saying, oh no, you're worth more than this. You don't need to be the like bait, you know, follow their little bait to go like win a $20 Walmart card instead of whatever it is that they are really, you know, the big prize. It had to do with the energy of the offer, the energy of the exchange, and like, no. And that is a big part of, I think, what we didn't learn. You know, what you're talking about, you learn the productivity and the achievement and the pay the bills. And of course, you know, I'm homeschooling kids and I get it. I get that, like, it's a challenge to teach them to think for themselves, to trust their intuition, and figure out how to navigate the culture that we live in. You know, you do have to kind of find a way to balance like your joy and figure out your way in this, right? It is a delicate thing to do, but I think it's important. That's why it's all the more important to do.
Yes, I think if I do one thing, if I teach my kids one thing, and that is to feel and understand that energy thing that you're talking about, I will have succeeded, because if they learn to trust that feel and they can make choices from that place to get clarity in whatever direction they go in, oh my gosh, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what an
like we have
amazing thing. And I'm
instinct.
already having, sitting down with my daughter a lot and having conversations like this. So I love that about her, that she can sit and
Mm.
have that energy conversation with me, and she doesn't like
Technical difficulties. Oh,
okay.
oh, you're back.
Your
You're back.
video screen froze on me.
Yeah, ditto.
Okay.
But I think that's a great thing to wrap it up, because we're trying not to keep this too long, is that the instinct. And I think that's huge, of what the healing and the going into the joy is, getting back in touch with ourselves and our instincts and our intuition and all that. We have that for a reason, right?
Yeah, no doubt. And what a gift to be able to not only teach it to our kids, but share it with the world, and share stories with the world that encourage other people that they can feel that too.
Yeah.
And that it's not some fairy thing that's not, doable. And I often think that part of our job is to bring those people that have been hanging around in their left brain a lot and not really coming over to that right brain and sort of integrating the two. It's like our job to pull those two sides together and show people how to do it in a way that's really workable,
Be able to use both, right? I talked in here about, I can use my head to work smarter in some ways, but that doesn't mean that it's necessarily what's leading. It's serving me to be able to, you use both. You don't throw either one out. You don't throw the head or the heart out. You need to make them harmonize.
Yes.
And your body's part of that, right? And some of us are not even very comfortable with our body. So that, even just that, we got to get to that step to be able to trust and tune in to those things, right? If we don't trust our bodies, then how do we use the feelings and the messages that they're sending us? So, much. I feel like we could just go on and on and on, because
forever.
That's what the books are for.
Yes, they are.
And additional conversations. And I know Laura hosts a few groups that I participate in, and she probably has more. And I've started a new group for this. So that is another place for the ongoing conversation. I hope it will be for both these books as they go out into the world, to bring together people who can, share together in a supportive environment where they feel that it's okay and that they're not alone on the journey. The book can help you not be alone, and getting into the groups online does help. I mean, it has been a process that I've been watching you go through, and you've been watching me go through, and I see us both blooming, into this where we weren't before in terms of the trusting of the joy. It has been a process, right? To get there. So,
and I think, it takes a community. You don't do something big in the world without help. Mm-hmm. And so just, reaching out and becoming more part of more of those kinds of communities and doing this together, it's so important. Yeah.
And I think there's place for both. There's those moments when you're sitting and writing that poem, but even in it, you said, why am I doing this? Why didn't I go out and join someone who was going to lift me up? Right. And there are times to tune in, and there are times when going out is not going to be what lifts us up. So I have the opposite experience. I'm why would I go do that when I know I'm not going to feel good after, versus staying and being my own best friend for tonight. So it can go either way, right? I've been in the other boat where I was the one who thought I had to go meet my party buddies, to have worth. And that's not what it is. It's your choice. And choosing who you are spending that time with, who is your support, who are your mirrors that are reflecting that, your real inner worth to you, right? Who can
so important
and reflect it. So that's part of the choice. It's not just to get support anywhere. You with discernment, right?
Yes, ma'am, for sure.
All right, so I will get this ready to share, and then we can share how you can win a copy of one of the two books, this one or Brave Healer. I think they make a great team.
Yes, they do.
Yeah,
so excited.
They do. And I thank you so much for taking this time to have this conversation. It's such a worthwhile conversation to open up. So this is just a little bit of us chatting with one another about something that we think is worthwhile and valuable, and we hope others can use this to keep the conversation going, right?
Definitely. Thank you so much. Loved it.
All right. Take care. And I look forward to seeing more of your book tour. She's got quite a few conversations coming up, right? So follow along. I will share, when I share this, I'll share all the info to find Laura online. And
awesome. Thank you.
Follow along with the journey.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Put our brave boots on. All right. Mwah. Let me.
Bye.